In this episode of Miniature Mashup, I turn a trashy toy into a tabletop terror. I also paint and review Arkon Studios' Animal Companions pack, and I get into what it means to be a reviewer on YouTube. Here's a spoiler, it's pretty sweet. In my last video, I reviewed Stargrave by Osprey Games, and while I found the game perfectly competent, there were a few things that didn't tickle my pickle. And in my haste to share my cinematic masterpiece with you, I forgot to think of suggestions that might mitigate the things I didn't like that much. One of my big complaints was that the captains and first mates seemed a little underwhelming considering their leadership positions, and hey, I get enough of that with US politics, am I right? But on Facebook, someone made the brilliant suggestion of simply replacing the captains with wizards from Frostgrave, and yeah, that's a goodie. There's no reason you couldn't do that. I might try that out and maybe give them some really good gear to begin with, and see if that helps. Additionally, someone suggested using 2d10s instead of a single d20 to make the game less dicey. I might also try that. The best thing about having this channel is being able to talk with viewers and get their feedback. Your support is the reason this channel even exists. I met with several of you in person, we've played games together, we correspond online, and in these days of social isolation, this has meant the world to me. But the second best perk is getting free swag to review. As fans of this channel, you must know how cheap I am. And my favorite genre of miniature is free stuff. So on some level, I'm incentivized to give out good reviews because I want companies to keep giving me their stuff, and I'm scared that if I'm too harsh a critic, that's gonna stop. But in spite of that, I owe it to the viewers to simply deliver my honest opinions on the products I review. I may have been critical of Stargrave, but keep in mind, that's just my opinion, and there's plenty of reviewers out there who disagree with me. It's my hope that Joseph McCullough and the folks at Osprey Games send me more games to review, because I really like what they do over there, and anyone who is helping to take a bite out of the de facto monopoly that is tabletop wargaming deserves to be praised. Osprey Games is an important company with impeccable table manners, and they deserve your support. That brings us to this week's review, the Animal Companions pack from Arkon Studios. You could get this pack for $39 US on their second Dungeons & Lasers Kickstarter. I imagine there are also shipping costs, although I'm not entirely sure. They are based out of Poland. The pack consists of 24 multi-part models on a sprue. They're made of a very firm plastic. The models snap together easily, and they're quite fun to assemble. The three I selected to work on for this review didn't have much in the way of mold lines to clean up, and what little plastic there was cleaned up pretty easily with an X-Acto knife. When putting these models together, I suggest getting the foot pegs into the bases first, and then assembling the rest of the model around that. And while we're at it, let's talk about the bases. They're highly detailed and they're textured already. I love that as it saves time and materials, and I'm all about getting miniatures done fast. The set comes with a pair of freedom birds, a pair of doggos, a pair of bears, 2 wolves, 2 weasels, 2 turtles that are not ninja but possibly mutant, 2 tuna heads, 2 foxes, 2 very spankable monkeys, and each pair comes with a fantasy version or a sci-fi variant. And there's also a doe-eyed dragon hatchling, an owl, 3 mimics, and a goblin burglar. The 3 I selected were the standard mimic, as I've never painted one but I've always wanted to, and the sci-fi wolf and the sci-fi dog. I am really happy with the way these 3 miniatures turned out. Now, I don't buy brand new miniatures of this quality as a rule, so it's kind of weird for me to talk about the price, but this set is $39 and it comes with 24 multi-piece models. This is what $38 gets you at Games Workshop. 5 miniatures. So, it seems to me like a comparatively very good deal. Less than $2 per mini is a bit cheaper than even Reaper Bones miniatures. And as far as the sculpting goes, here are my 2 cyber dogs with 2 of my space marines. They seem comparable, right? I think they blend pretty seamlessly, so when you compare the price, it seems like a pretty good deal. Overall, I think this is a good use of your money. It's the kind of thing you could go in with somebody and split the miniatures up. Maybe somebody just wants the sci-fi, maybe somebody just wants the fantasy, but it certainly gets the miniature mashup seal of approval. Now, once again, I've picked up another Happy Meal toy from a flea market for 50 cents. This is a How to Train Your Dragon Happy Meal toy from 2010. I've already done the Red Death from this very same set in this video here if you'd like to check that out. This time we're doing the Grunkle Dragon. All these Happy Meal toys, they come with these very obvious holes where the screws that are holding them together are put in. Just very simple matter to conceal them with a little bit of hot glue. I just fill them up. You could certainly use putty, 2-part epoxy, what have you, sand and white glue maybe even. You can go very cheap on this, but for me, the fastest, easiest method, tiny hot glue gun. I just fill them up, and really makes a difference. Well, on this particular model, you're not going to see these hollows in the legs, but I'm going to fill them up with glue anyway. It's just a good habit to get into. A lot of these McDonald's toys will have hollow areas. Just filling them up. They usually look a little better if someone does look under there. Certainly, I'm not modeling the interior of a leg here, just trying to mitigate some of that hollowness. There's also a big hinge in the back of his head, so his jaw can open and shut, and I'm just going to cover that up with hot glue for now, although we will come back and put a 2-part epoxy putty over that. And because the whole jaw moves on this toy, there's a little bit of a gap here between the top of the head and the rest of the sculpt. I'm just going to fill that in with glue also. Now, I think the sculpt on this dragon is pretty good, but this tail is unforgivable. It makes the whole dragon look like a lumpy poo. Is it supposed to be like a rabbit's cotton tail or the puff at the end of a toy poodle's tail? Just going to chop this thing off with my Dremel tool. And I've got a nice dollar store Ankylosaurus here. Different brands put these out, and they're all pretty good. I used a different brand of one to make my land shark video. I'll put the link for that in the description below. But dollar store dinosaurs make good cheap fodder for your kit bashing. I'm just going to take the tail off with a safety knife, and then I'm going to attach it using a 2-part epoxy. That's pretty much the only thing that works with these plastic dinosaurs from the dollar store. I find that most other glues just aren't very responsive to this material. Looks like it's going to be a pretty good fit, not only size-wise, but texturally. And then we're just going to mix up our stinky 2-part epoxy in a little glass jar here with a toothpick. Going to put that on the inside of the tail and stick that on his butt, and we'll have to wait until that cures. I find that the curing process can be sped up a little bit if you have your tuna head come over and get high off of the fumes. I scruff up the bottom of these plastic glossy feet with my Dremel tool, and then I put a little bit more of that 2-part epoxy on the bottom of this model's feet so we can put it on the base. And now I'm just chopping up a cork to make a little bit of stone for the base. I'm going to stick it there with my favorite glue, E6000. Then I'll do the rest of the base with just white PVA glue and craft sand. And of course, as is often the case here on Miniature Mashup, the base for this large monster is just going to be a can lid taken off a can with a safety can opener. And then it's outside for the oh-so-rare white priming spray. Almost never use this, but I thought I'd make this miniature bright and colorful for a change. Last time on here, I did a dark and dingy, rotting death night, so I thought I'd mix it up and do something a little bit more tropical. The sculpt kind of reminds me of a chameleon, and I thought I'd lean into that a little bit when it came time for the painting. But now that I'm looking at it all in one color, I realize I don't like the way I joined that dinosaur tail to this plastic toy, so I'm going to cover that area up with a little bit of a 2-part epoxy putty, and while I'm at it, I'm going to stick it here and there to add a few extra details that I think will really make the model look a little more interesting. I never know how much of this stuff to pinch off. I end up cutting off way more than I need here. Don't be like me. I found a place to put the rest of that cork. You know, inspiration can come from anywhere. Now I'm just going to roll it out and wrap it around the area I want to conceal. I'm going to come back at it with a little silicone sculpting tool and texture it in a way that sort of blends it in to the existing textures on the model. I got these silicone texturing tools via Wish, and they were very cheap, less than $2, I think, for a pack of 8 or 10. Sculpting is definitely not my strong suit. It's something I'm trying to develop as a skill. Every time I do this, you're watching me work and learn, but a little effort goes a long way. I believe it's good practice to paint from the inside out. That is the lowest, most recessed areas to the outward areas on the highest point on the model. So we're going to start with the underbelly, and I'm going to do a dark undercoat. I've got this Griffin tan here, high density pigment, and using a fairly large brush, I'm just going to start slathering that on. The nice thing about doing these bigger monsters is that they're large enough that I don't have to hold them up to my face, and I can get it on camera. A lot of the time when I don't show myself painting a smaller model, it's because I'm doing some detail work and my vision isn't great. It never was. I've always worn glasses, and now I'm getting up there and it's getting worse. So a big model like this, I get to showcase the painting. I know a lot of you want to see more of my painting for some reason, so I'm trying to make that happen. I hope you're enjoying it. And that tan underbelly is going to start at the jaw and go all the way under to the tip of the tail. And I'm just using a cheap wood barrel crafts paint for the skin, for the base coat here. Just a nice ivy green color. Because it's a cheaper paint, you might need to put a second coat on. I certainly did. I just want to see how this purple plays off this green before I commit to it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Once we've decided on that, it's time to dry brush a little bit of yellowish green over this whole model just to make the texture on it pop. I'm just using a regular old makeup brush for this, getting it very dry and just taking my time with it. You don't want to put too much on. You really want a nice dry makeup brush. You just pass that over. I'm just doing downstrokes from the top here all over the model, again, just to make those scales and bumps really come out. And I'm using a little bit of cinnamon colored wood barrel craft paint to fill in our base here. I'll then come back with like a mustard yellow or a Turner's yellow and a dry brush to really make that pop. And then I'll, of course, do the stones in a regular old gray and then highlight that with something lighter. We're just going to dry brush a bright orange onto our tan underbelly using a makeup brush the same way, just downstrokes only. There's just a lot of texture on this model, and we want it all to really show up in the finished product. Don't worry about getting that dry brush on the wings. We're just going to cover that up with a different paint scheme later. In fact, the wings are going to be pretty much the last thing we paint on this model. Not counting any sort of freehand or tiny details we're going to pick up. Keeping with the colorful chameleon theme, I'm going to pick out all of these little bumps, these little pustules he's covered with a nice purple from Games Workshop. Alright, time to lay in the base coat on the wing. And I'm just using the same tan I used on the underbelly. Okay, let's start hitting these teeth with a nice white or off-white. And here I am just dry brushing a Turner or mustard yellow onto our base to really make the little sand granules stand out. Just throwing in some shadows using a slightly darker green than our base coat green and really watering it down to make it simulate a wash. The areas I'm covering are big enough that I don't really need it to be a wash, and in fact we're going to come in here with a blue wash later to really bring out the sort of finer seams on this tail and other areas. But to make that a little more transitional, we're going to put in some thinned down, darker green paint first. After that, it's just a matter of picking out some of the finer details, and I free-handed some eyes onto our model. I think the overall effect is pretty great. It could be a stand-in for a wyvern, or a drake, basilisk, any sort of dragon-adjacent creature. Maybe it's some kind of giant scorpion dragon hybrid. I don't know, but it does seem like something that could fit seamlessly into the world of Forgotten Realms, though, doesn't it? Guys, as always, please support this channel by subscribing and liking and hitting the bell. Come say hey to me on the Facebook page. We've got a Facebook page for Miniature Mashup. It's a great place to see pictures of this project or projects we've done in the past. While you're at it, why not check out my eBay store? I don't have any miniatures from the show on there right now, but I do have a bunch of really cool board games available. If you just can't get enough of this voice, I'm going to be on the Pop Culture Cake podcast this coming Monday. I'll put the link for that when that episode drops in the description below also. As always, a very special thanks to the people who make this show possible. If you'd like to be one of them and donate to my GoFundMe campaign, again, the link for that is going to be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.